Good morning. Could I welcome members to the 12th meeting of the Public Audit Committee and ask those present to ensure that mobile phones, etc. are switched off. No apologies have been received. I think we have a full class today. And first item on the agenda is to invite Hugh Henry to declare any interest relevant to the remit of this committee.
Nothing to declare, Convener.
Thank you. Only members of the Scottish Labour Party are eligible to be chosen as convener of the Public Audit Committee. So can I then invite nominations for the position of convener? Thank you, James. That's James nominating Hugh Henry, and I think I'm right in saying seconded. We've got a battle to nominate Hugh Henry here. Well, I'm delighted to say James Dornan got there first, James nominated and Kenneth seconded. Are there any further nominations for convener? No. Can I just ask the committee to agree that Hugh Henry be reinstated as convener of the Public Audit Committee? And I pass over to Hugh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you to the other committee members for their support. Audit has always been an interesting and I think somewhat understated committee, and I'm sure that will continue, and I look forward to some of the challenges and indeed working with, I hesitate to use the word old faces, but some of the familiar faces that seem to have been here for a while, and I won't mention any names, Willie Coffey, but I don't know what you've done to deserve such a long stint here. Waiting for your return. Anyway, thank you very much. Can we go to item 3 on the agenda and agree to take items 5 and 6 in private?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4, Section 23 report. Now, I know that previously the committee has been looking at the issue of early departures from the Scottish public sector, and the committee had agreed to write to the Scottish Government to ask for further information. And you have before you a reply from Sir Peter Housden, the Permanent Secretary. Now, I've looked at the letter which had been agreed that the committee would issue, and it's fairly short and sharp and to the point. I must confess, I haven't been aware of the discussions that preceded the writing of that letter, but I would have to say that I am extremely disappointed, to say the least, with the reply from Sir Peter Housden, because he singularly fails to answer the question that was asked. You know, it's not rocket science to understand what was asked in the letter, and there's absolutely no reference in the reply to the question which was asked. It's a letter which obfuscates and just avoids the point completely. And it's disappointing that in something I would have thought so fairly straightforward, why we couldn't get the information that the committee required. And I don't see how the committee can actually reach a conclusion without the information that it requested. Are there any other views? Colin, and then Ken, and then Tavish.
I think the response series makes it clear that they've not sought at this time to collect central data. They don't say why. They just say they don't do it.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to know the reasons why they deemed it appropriate not to do so.
Yeah. No, exactly. That was the central question. Why? And just no answer. Answer, Ken.
Yes, like you, Convener, I wasn't on the committee when the report came from the Auditor General managing early departures. However, I actually, as it happens, I conducted a series of FOIs myself of all public sector organisations on this very subject of severance and redundancy payments, and received information that shows the figures are quite staggering. I mean, these are enormous sums of money we're talking about. Just on compromise agreements alone, I just had a look at this before this morning. In the last 6 years, there have been 12,500 compromise agreements in the public sector. 12,500. That's just from my FOIs. And that's totalled at least 52 million. My figures are actually slightly less than the Auditor General's I think she includes pension strain and redundancy, which I didn't. So I'm saying it's at least 52 million. So the figures themselves are substantial. Within that, I just looked at some of the variation. From year to year, over the last 6 years, the figures have varied from less than 3 million one year to just under 18 million in another. From about 800 payments in one year to 4,000 in another. In other words, there's huge variation just in that 6 years. Now, if we're talking about the amount of money we are, we're talking about the public resources, I thought at the very, very least, the government needs to be across this. I'm not saying the government's individually responsible for all these decisions, but the government is responsible for the overall budget. I would have thought that at the very least they would want to monitor the use of these payments. The Auditor General flagged up that compromise agreements are not subject to the same degree of public disclosure, and she flags that up as a concern. So the fact that we're not even monitoring, never mind their use, never mind monitoring them, how much, what they might disguise, I think it's a source of concern. So can I suggest that at the very least I would have thought we could write back to Sir Peter Housden. I'd be happy to, well, you can just quote the figures I've given you because they're straight from my FOI. If I can get these figures by FOIing as a backbencher, I think I would have thought the government with the civil service at its disposal could quite easily access this information. It was not a difficult process. So I would suggest that we perhaps, even if we just ask the same question again, I'd like a better answer on why, given how important this is.
Well, we can come back to what the committee decides at the end of the discussion. Can I just clarify the 12,500 compromise agreements that you identified? Would that have included government agencies, those agencies with a relationship with government, but also councils of varying political persuasion?
Yeah. All public sector,
right.
NHS, councils, universities, the whole public sector.
Right, okay. Tavish and
I'm just going to observe from Convener, as I think as Colin Beattie rightly inferred, possibly not stated quite so clearly, I don't think we should accept the Permanent Secretary not giving us an answer. That, to my mind, sets a pretty clear way of working within the body of government. And I mean, at civil service, our job is not to question ministers, our job is to question civil servants. So if the senior civil servant doesn't answer a very straightforward and easily understood question, then what chance do we have of getting other civil servants to reply properly to the committee? So I think whatever we finish up doing, I think the important point is that no civil servant, and especially the chief, the most senior one in the Scottish system, should be allowed to get away with basically telling a committee that I'm really not that bothered, I'm just not going to give you an answer.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Yeah, thank you very much, Convener. Convener, I think your last point was actually quite important in asking Ken McIntosh in relation to the numbers, which public bodies would be included in compromise agreement figures. And I understand there may be a nervousness about how these are reported, but just because you have to be sophisticated in how you report these compromise agreements is not necessarily a reason to not report them. I think it's about getting the process correct. So I'm just reading from the reply we had where Sir Peter says these agreements are considered by both the Scottish Government and in our arm's length bodies on their individual merits and the criteria and processes set out in the Scottish Public Finance Manual. I totally accept that, and I appreciate that just looking at raw data of compromise agreements may not tell the full story, and nervousness of individual politicians jumping on figures without realising the details behind those figures, but that's not a reason not to present them. It's a reason to get the presentation of them correct and in a sophisticated way that we can access them. So I think we're right in terms of going, well, if the government's keeping this under review, why are they keeping it under review, and what do they see to be in the public interest in relation to greater openness and transparency in reporting these figures? So I think we should go back and we should just say, well, look, we asked you why. We appreciate that it's not a simplistic thing to do, but if it's work in progress, could you give us more information in relation to that?
Yeah.
It was just just to say that this was flagged up by Bob Black, the previous Auditor General. It was also flagged up by Caroline Gardner. So I think that, on that basis, apart from the views of the committee, we do have a responsibility to look at this. I have to say I was distinctly underwhelmed by the half-page answer where we referred to a government manual And in line with Colin Beattie, I do think it's not satisfactory. And I think particularly as Sir Peter Housden is not only the Permanent Secretary to the Government, but he's also the Chief Accountable Officer. And as the Public-Audit-Committee for this Parliament, I do think we deserve more than we've got here.
Okay, thank you, Willie.
Thanks very much, Convener. We should remind ourselves what the Permanent Secretary said there. He did say that this information is disclosed with respect to the particular organisations involved. You see his second paragraph there, it makes that quite clear. What's not made clear, and the point I think what members are making, is that it's not centrally collected up as a kind of all roll-up statistics. So the information is there. Well, let's be clear about that. It is reported. It depends how far back you want to go with this. I mean, Ken went back 6 years, but I presume the system relating to this has been in place for some considerable time. And it's really, what is the value for the committee, and how far back does the committee want to go to find answers to this kind of stuff? Or would we look to the future, probably more wisely, Convener, to see if there's a better system that gives us the kind of accountability that we think is lacking? But the information is there, as I understand it, in terms of the agencies that use these mechanisms.
Yeah, although one thing that I'm not clear about, and it might be worthwhile asking, is it says that the Government Financial Reporting Manual requires disclosure of such agreements in respect of Management Board members. It doesn't state whether disclosure is actually required in relation to others. It might be useful to find that out. I'm taking from the discussion that there is a feeling in the committee that this reply is unsatisfactory, that we need an answer to the question which was asked, and that we should go back to Sir Peter Housden and seek the information that we need. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Right, and with that we move into private session.